They call me Mama. I'm not going to my grandchildren. 7 of them. We're always together.
Good job. All right, cool.
My whole fitness journey started when I was diagnosed with diabetes. I didn't care to make any changes. I didn't care what I felt like. Didn't even want to make my bed in the morning. I went to follow up with my doctor, and he said, you need something about it. So I took my diet more seriously. I started walking. Quest. I fell in love with it the moment I put the headset on. When I first opened the app for Supernatural, the scenery is just so beautiful. It's like you're there.
Hello and welcome to your Kids Super Free.
You're just moving to the music. I was having fun. I was hooked.
Woo! Dodging those lasers is feeling good. We got one more to go. Let's hit it.
Moving with a purpose gave me purpose to.
Chest is up, eyes forward, we're picking up our feet as we move.
The quest has given me an outlet that's healthy and makes me feel good. Now, family is my world. I do it for that.
I was always very curious. I like to take apart things to see what's inside and how I can fix this or make it better. I have that sense of achievement and feeling proud of myself, and that motivates me to do more. Okay, I suggest that people fix their own roof, and then things are thrown away and ended up in the landfills. So the good you start to of critical reason. Thank you. Originally, it was a physical repair. We had to and digitize it. We push it in group, and because of that, we grew exponentially. We can collaborate with other people because there are people with experience that can help you to repair. 40% of it are electronic items, and then we have things like furniture and gates and clothing and bags. One thing about physical spaces, participants have to travel to the space. And it's a problem for those who are living in the outskirts or maybe have problems with transportation. And I came up with the idea where I can actually build a moving makerspace with tools and go to communities. I think by now we have already done easily over 2 million ringgit worth of item fix. Hey, come on. But the thing that motivates me is actually looking at someone else successfully repair something or learn something new. You can see it in their face, right? And their smile and their excitement. I sort of saw that energy as well. One smile, another person smile, and if everyone is smiling, we can motivate the entire world.
Holistic wellness is taking care of your mind, body, and soul. I used to struggle with anxiety and depression a lot, and I needed to find approach that was accessible. So I got into yoga and meditation. I was taking classes at the local wellness center, and I realized I was the only Black girl there. They all just looked at me like, what is she doing here? I've even had one tell me my hair was distracting and they told me to change it. Those kind of experiences led me to create Black Girls Healing House, a online holistic wellness community for Black women.
Hello everyone. How are y'all? Y'all look good.
There is a lack of diversity in wellness. So there's a need to bridge those gaps, because it's not like Black women don't want to go to yoga. It's just they need a space where they feel comfortable and supported, and they see other girls doing it too.
Good. Make sure y'all breathing, okay?
Next thing I knew, it was about 60,000 women there who wanted to prioritize their self-care. From the Facebook group, we were able to do community events, and we've also been able to grow into doing international retreats with each other, where they can practice self-care and they can practice wellness, and they can also connect with each other on a deeper level. I really feel that community is like the missing piece when it comes to wellness. I believe it's helped change the narrative. We are making an impact around the world, and we are all celebrating others' healings.
Good day, and welcome to Meta's 2023 Annual Meeting of Shareholders. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Should there be any technical issues during the meeting, please stand by while we work to correct them and continue with the meeting. I would now like to turn the conference over to Kate Kelly, Vice President, Deputy General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Kelly, Meta's Corporate Secretary. Together with Mark and the rest of Meta's Board of Directors, I want to welcome you to our 2023 Annual Meeting of Shareholders. We value the opportunity today to speak with you about our company and answer your questions. Like last year, we have made arrangements for you to submit questions both in advance of and during today's meeting. It is my privilege to serve as chair of this annual meeting, which I now call to order. You should all see on the virtual meeting portal the agenda for today's meeting. This is the order of items we will be covering today. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you of the rules of conduct, which you should see under the meeting materials on the meeting portal. We ask that you please read and follow the procedures. I am joined today by many members of our board of directors, including our board chair and CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, our lead independent director, Ambassador Bob Kimmett, as well as Peggy Alford, Mark Andreessen, Drew Houston, Nancy Killefer, and Tracy Travis. We have a number of senior executives present as well who will participate in the Q&A, including Jennifer Newstead, our Chief Legal Officer, who will act as chair of this annual meeting in the event of any technical difficulties that prevent me from performing my duties today. Andrew Cotton of Ernst & Young LLP, our independent registered public accounting firm, is also with us today, as well as Chris Vico, who will act as Inspector of Election for this meeting and who will tabulate the results of the voting. Turning now to the formal business. The proxy statement was properly mailed or made available to all shareholders of record as of April 6, 2023. I have been advised by the Inspector of Election that the holders of shares representing over 85% of the voting power of our Class A and Class B common stock voting together as a single class are in attendance or represented by proxy here today, and the requisite quorum for each proposal is therefore present. Accordingly, this meeting is authorized to transact the business set forth in the proxy statement. As outlined in the proxy statement, we have 13 proposals to consider at this meeting. If you have already voted, you do not need to vote again unless you wish to change your vote. Any shareholder present who has not voted or who wishes to change their vote may vote at this meeting by using the voting link. I now declare the polls open for voting on the items to be presented at the meeting, and note for the record that it is May 31st, 2023 at 10:04 a.m. Pacific Time. You may vote at any time during our discussion of the proposals on the agenda. The polls will close after the last proposal has been presented. The first item of business is to elect our board of directors to serve until our next annual meeting. The nominees for director and their biographies are set forth in the proxy statement on pages 12 to 19. All 9 directors will be elected for terms expiring at the 2024 annual meeting. The board of directors recommends a vote for the election of each director nominee. The second item of business is to ratify the appointment of the independent auditor. The board of directors, on the recommendation of the Audit and Risk Oversight Committee, has appointed Ernst & Young LLP as our independent registered public accounting firm for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2023, and is seeking ratification by the shareholders. The board of directors recommends a vote for this proposal, as described on page 39 in the proxy statement. We will now turn to the shareholder proposals to be presented at this meeting. Each shareholder proponent will present their proposal. Proponents were given the option to either present live or submit a pre-recorded statement. For those presenting live, I will direct the operator to open your line when it is your turn to present your proposal. Please limit your statement to no more than 3 minutes. First, for Proposal 3, I am pleased to invite Paul Chesser, Director of the Corporate Integrity Project of the National Legal and Policy Center, to speak on behalf of the National Legal and Policy Center. Operator, please play Mr. Chesser's recorded statement.
Meta responds to our proposal to itemize government censorship requests it has received and to identify government officials and bureaucrats who made those requests by saying the company is transparent about such matters. But saying you're transparent doesn't make it so. A visit to Meta's alleged transparency reports gives you numbers, but no identities. Numbers are meaningless. All these numbers tell you is that censorship of free speech is a massive problem and that Meta subsidiary Facebook helpfully enforces the practice. And in the process, Facebook covers up and protects those government officials from being identified for their shameful, unconstitutional actions. If you need an example, think of the former head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci was known to have some conversations with Meta's CEO and co-founder, Mark Zuckerberg. Dr. Fauci was the ultimate disinformation specialist as a leader of the influential government task force on COVID. The government response produced perhaps the greatest, maybe longest-lasting government-driven economic and health disaster our country has seen. And Facebook aided and abetted it by censoring those who disagreed with Dr. Fauci at his behest. Meanwhile, Facebook helped disseminate Dr. Fauci's disinformation about COVID's origins and its transmission, vaccines, mask wearing, lockdowns, and closing schools. Like so much of what we see on Silicon Valley's social media platforms these days, information was called disinformation, and much of the so-called disinformation that was censored was actually real information. Then there's the so-called fact checkers that Facebook enlists to make its decisions on whether content should be allowed on the platform. What a joke they are. This global fact-checking network is funded by George Soros. Enough said about that. And then there's the secretive online portal that Meta maintains where people in government can quickly and easily turn in Facebook users they disagree with or don't like. Our proposal asks for Meta to identify these malicious individuals in government who are supposed to be public servants, not speech police. But we're realistic that Mr. Zuckerberg, who has shareholder voting control of the company, will never allow that. It's why there's now a lawsuit led by Louisiana and Missouri that could cause some serious collateral damage against the company, which heightens the risk for shareholders. You know, Facebook used to be a great business, but between censorship and false advertising about reach and diminished audience largely because of those two things, Facebook is greatly devalued. Mr. Zuckerberg has ruined Facebook in favor of his virtual reality pipe dreams and now AI. Please vote for Proposal 3.
Thank you. The board's position can be found on page 70 of the proxy statement. I see we actually have a question on this proposal. This question comes from Craig R. He asks, if Meta truly has no stake in restricting conservative speech related to requests from government officials, then why does it oppose Shareholder Proposal 3 regarding disclosing government requests to take down posts? Is Meta hiding an incentive to also want to restrict such speech? Thanks for the question, Craig. We are committed to transparency through the publication of information on how we address government requests for user data, content violating local laws, global internet disruptions, and intellectual property. Given the company's ongoing efforts to address this topic, the board believes that the requested report is unnecessary and would not provide additional benefit to our shareholders. We highlight that our Transparency Center already includes documents and data that provide detail on how we handle government takedown requests, and our existing reporting includes statistics for content we restricted based on local law in the country in which it was restricted, including in response to government requests. Importantly, these reports include the disclosure of the government authority submitted the takedown request, except in limited instances where we are explicitly prohibited by applicable law from doing so. We have also updated our Facebook and Instagram notifications when users view content that have been restricted based on local law as a result of a government takedown request to now provide users with information on which government authority sent the takedown request, except in limited instances where we are explicitly prohibited by applicable law from doing so. Further, the company's separate oversight board independently reviews a selection of Meta's content decisions to help interpret our policies and respect free expression. In response to a ruling and recommendation from the Independent Oversight Board, we have committed to further increase transparency around government requests for content removals. In particular, as previously disclosed, we are in the process of developing consistent and reliable systems for gathering metrics on the number of pieces of content removed under our community standards as a result of government requests. Additional details can be found on the company's position on this matter beginning on page 70 of its proxy statement. Thanks very much for the question. Moving to Proposal 4, I am pleased to invite Mari Schweitzer to speak on behalf of the North Star Asset Management and the co-filer. Operator, please play Ms. Schweitzer's recorded statement.
My name is Mari Schweitzer from North Star Asset Management in Boston. On behalf of North Star and our co-filer, New York State Comptroller Thomas D. Napoli, I am presenting Resolution Number 4, a request that Meta's board take steps to adopt a recapitalization plan for all outstanding stock to have one vote per share. North Star has been coming to this shareholder meeting to talk about equal shareholder voting since 2015. And year after year, the vast majority of outside shareholders support our request. It's clear that shareholders want to have a say in the important matters of the companies in which they invest. Many governance experts agree with us, and the SEC calls on shareholders to vote their proxies as the primary way for shareholders to make their views known to company management. Without equal voting rights, shareholders' ability to provide feedback to the board and protect their investment is diminished. Yet at Meta, ordinary shareholders do not have an equal ability to weigh in on significant matters of corporate policy due to the fact that Mr. Zuckerberg controls the majority of voting shares without owning commensurate economic value of the firm. We believe that multi-class share structures empower the CEO and insiders to appoint a board that primarily serves the CEO and management, not shareholders. We also believe that these fears have been borne out in the recent years of scandal. In its opposition statement, the company asserts that the current unequal voting structure allows it to focus on long-term success. However, the company continues to be fraught by controversies that we believe could have been avoided with proper governance reforms. Year after year, Meta is in the news for its connection to incidents that harm real people, incite violence, and weaken democracies. Recently, an Amnesty International investigation found that, quote, Meta's algorithms proactively amplified and promoted content which incited violence, hatred, and discrimination against the Rohingya, pouring fuel on the fire of long-standing discrimination and substantially increasing the risk of an outbreak of mass violence, end quote. We believe that not only do these controversies create material reputational risk, but also legal, regulatory, and financial risks that can impact shareholder value. We also believe that this lack of oversight and related unforeseen consequences may continue if shareholders are unable to receive equal voting representation to make their concerns heard. Shareholders, we again urge you to vote for proxy item number 4, a recapitalization plan for all outstanding stocks to have 1 vote per share. Thank you.
Thank you. The board's position can be found on page 72 of the proxy statement. For Proposal 5, I am pleased to welcome Lydia Kuykendall to speak on behalf of Mercy Investment Services and the other co-filers. Operator, please play Ms. Kuykendall's recorded statement.
Good morning. My name is Lydia Kuykendall. I'm with Mercy Investment Services, as well as representing 5 co-filers. I hereby move proposal number 5 regarding the human rights impact assessment of targeted advertising. Meta's business model relies almost entirely on ads, with nearly 98% of Facebook's global revenue generated from advertising, which amounts to over $113 billion in 2022 alone. These ads deploy algorithmic systems to enable their delivery. These algorithms determine the ads that users see, which enables the exploitation of individuals' vulnerabilities, perpetuating existing systemic discrimination and marginalization, and can lead to the exclusion of certain groups of people. And the risk to investors is already clear and present. In January of this year, the company faced a nearly €400 million fine for breaking EU data rules around targeted advertisements. As one reporter stated, quote, it means Meta will potentially have to change the way a key part of its business works, end quote. And just days ago, we discovered that Ireland is set to hand the company a record-setting fine. As of this recording, it will likely eclipse the previous record set by Amazon at €746 million. Further, the company has been named in a lawsuit on behalf of the victims of the 2022 mass shooting in Buffalo, New York, specifically calling out the shooter for being radicalized by, quote, the algorithms driving the social media products he used, which fed him increasingly racist, anti-Semitic, and violence-inducing content. These addictive algorithms, in turn, maximize his engagement with the platforms and the corresponding advertising revenue to the companies, end quote. This is not a theoretical risk, but a true fundamental danger to the company itself and one that is possibly preventable. The company's statement of opposition includes reference to the salient risk analysis they are conducting. It should be noted that Meta has not committed to naming targeted advertising as a salient risk. Furthermore, this would be an internal assessment with no indication that the results will be made public. While there is utility to be found in such an assessment, we believe that when examining the pulse of the entire revenue stream, outside leadership and third-party perspectives are necessary to avoid the findings being limited by any previously held biases or leanings. Additionally, with no transparency, there can be no accountability. And for risk analysis like this, the results should be placed in the public sphere. The nearly unmatched reach and influence of this company requires an equally unmatched commitment to preserving and respecting human rights across all parts of the business model. That business model relies on a single source of revenue, advertising. Targeted advertising, given concerns around fairness, accountability, and transparency of the underlying systems, has been heavily scrutinized for its adverse impacts on human rights and is targeted for significant regulation. This is a material risk to investors. A robust human rights impact assessment will enable Meta to better identify, address, mitigate, and prevent such adverse human rights impacts that expose the company to regulatory, legal, and financial risks. For these reasons, we ask that you support proposal number 5. Thank you.
Thank you. The board's position can be found on page 74 of the proxy statement. For Proposal 6, Matthew Illian will be speaking on behalf of United Church Funds. Operator, please open Mr. Illian's line.
Thank you, Kelly, and greetings to the board, executives, and my fellow shareholders. On behalf of United Church Funds, I move proposal number 6, asking our company to provide a report on its lobbying, both directly through state and federal lobbying expenditures and indirectly through its payments to trade associations and social welfare groups. Investors are asking companies to disclose all payments to third-party groups that use money to influence policy. Meta provides some limited information on its lobbying activities and oversight, but fails to provide a comprehensive report. And this information would assist investors in assessing reputational, legal, and financial risks associated with the company's efforts to influence federal and state policy. Proxy advisor ISS recommends support for this proposal. Last year, this same proposal received majority support from outside shareholders. Full disclosure of Meta's lobbying will ensure proper oversight of our company's lobbying, and we urge shareholders to vote for this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. The board's position appears on page 77 of the proxy statement. For Proposal 7, Apar Gupta will be speaking on behalf of some of us. Operator, please play Mr. Gupta's recorded statement.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I am Apar Gupta, the founding director of the Internet Freedom Foundation. Today, my statement draws from the work of grassroots activists, human rights defenders, journalists, gender minorities, and lower caste groups of the most populous country in the world. I salute their courage and recognize their wounds. Today, a crisis affects Meta's reputation, operations, ESG commitments, and ultimately your investments. Meta platforms are used by many, if not all Indians, and India is Meta's largest market. This widespread use by its very nature bears the weight of social responsibility. Today, Meta is failing these obligations to the Indian Republic in its duty to its shareholders to make full and accurate disclosures. One prominent instance is when New Delhi suffered communal clashes in 2020 that resulted in 53 deaths. When a fact-finding report pointed towards the role of Meta, the company resisted summons by lawmakers from the Delhi Legislative Assembly and had to be directed by the Supreme Court to appear. The Indian Supreme Court observed Facebook has become a platform for disruptive messages, voices, and ideologies. And this is a pattern of Meta avoiding transparency and accountability to its users, public institutions, and you, its shareholders. Today, Meta's board response to Resolution 7 would have you believe it makes quote-unquote extensive disclosures and has, quote, published an independent human rights impact assessment regarding potential rights risks in India. This is a materially false statement. The HRIA report has been withheld despite demands by numerous civil society stakeholders, including me, who were interviewed. Meta's 4-page response and disclosure on the HRIA is self-serving, surprising, even stupefying. They contradict the testimony provided by me and is at substantial variance with the release of other HRIAs by Meta. Meta's cited justification for non-disclosure is also contrary to the UN guiding principles as interpreted by the Danish Institute of Human Rights, which has been cited by it in its own defense. It expressly, in fact, states and contradicts its positions by stating that companies should work towards full disclosure of HRIA processes and findings. Now, we have waited for 3 years and still there is silence from Meta. This is all the more troubling because India is set to witness a very polarizing general election in 2024. Today, you all have the historic opportunity to prevent complicity in human rights abuse. I urge you to vote for this resolution, although dual class shares make it impossible to secure a majority of votes. Let this not prevent you from hearing the call of your conscience for the people of India. Please heed the evocation of Prime Minister Nehru, who on the eve of India's independence stated, quote, peace has been said to be indivisible. So is freedom, so is prosperity now. And so also is disaster in this one world that can no longer be split into isolated fragments. End of quote. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. The board's position is on page 79 of the proxy statement. For Proposal 8, Katie Carter will be speaking on behalf of Presbyterian Church USA and the other co-filer. Operator, please open Ms. Carter's line.
Fellow shareholders, my name is Katie Carter, and on behalf of the Presbyterian Church USA and Portico Benefit Services, I move item 8, which encourages our company to disclose its framework for assessing its policy influence activities and their alignment with Meta's stated climate goals. While we applaud recent commitments Meta Platforms has made to set net zero ambitions and support some climate advocacy efforts, the company's existing disclosures and practices fall far short of what this proposal requests for 3 reasons. 1, Meta does not identify any framework for analyzing the company's climate policy engagement and whether those efforts are aligned with the company's own climate commitments and strategies. Meta further does not explain how it would define alignment with its current policy advocacy efforts, nor how it would rectify any identified policy misalignments. 2, the company does not comprehensively report on its trade associations and social welfare organizations that engage in public policy, making it difficult for investors and stakeholders to gauge the level of alignment by Meta's third parties. 3, many of Meta's trade associations and social welfare organization partners lobby and influence policy matters on the company's behalf. This is often at odds with its own climate strategies. The company fails to acknowledge the harm that such groups pose in both working against its climate objectives and in delaying critical climate change policies needed to reduce global risk. The company notes that climate change is the greatest threat we all face, and the need to act grows more urgent every day. The science is clear and unambiguous. We want to see bold action agreed to with the strongest possible commitments to achieve net zero targets that help limit warming to 1.5 degrees. Yet many of the largest trade associations it belongs to would act otherwise. But this framework applies to Meta Platforms' internal policy influence alignment as well. The company failed to support the Inflation Reduction Act in the US in 2022. Climate policy research firm InfluenceMap gives Meta's climate policy efforts a C+, indicating the company is not engaging in the type of positive climate lobbying that would help it meet its climate objectives. Just last week, Meta made the news when it sought to defeat California's most recent climate disclosure bill addressing Scope 3 emissions reporting. These are just a few examples where it appears Meta's policy advocacy is misaligned with its climate objectives. Finally, investors increasingly expect companies to disclose this information. In 2021, 5 shareholder proposals asking companies to report on how their lobbying activities align with the goals of the Paris Agreement received majority support. Since then, trillions of dollars in assets have supported the launch of a global standard that spells out indicators and best practices for companies engaging in climate lobbying activities, including those requested here today. We therefore urge you to vote for Proposal 8 on Meta's proxy card. Thank you.
Thank you. The board's position can be found on page 82 of the proxy statement. For Proposal 9, Natasha Lamb will be speaking on behalf of Arjuna Capital. Operator, please play Ms. Lamb's recorded statement.
Good morning. My name is Natasha Lamb, Managing Partner at Arjuna Capital, and I move Proposal 9, asking Meta to examine the risks associated with how it handles data when facing abortion-related law enforcement requests. Reproductive freedom is under siege in the United States, increasing the risk that consumer data will be used for the enforcement of state laws that ban or restrict abortion access. In such cases, law enforcement relies on consumer data to investigate and prosecute individuals who provide aid or receive an abortion, even if the procedure was conducted in a state where abortion remains legal. Notably, Meta Platforms faced significant negative backlash when it turned over to Nebraska law enforcement Facebook messages of a mother and daughter discussing an abortion. This action resulted in the 2 women facing criminal charges. Because Meta amasses large troves of user data, it is vulnerable to increasing law enforcement requests in this new post-Dobbs environment. First and foremost, our company should be working to protect users' data and privacy. And unfortunately, Meta has a terrible track record of doing so further exposing it to controversy stemming from abortion-related law enforcement requests. Meta's current response to our request is to say it has built tools to give users more control over protecting their own data. Yet this places the onus on the user to figure out how to protect their data. Our company also says it will roll out default end-to-end encryption on all platforms, yet this has been promised for some time, and we still have no clear timeline as to when these updates will occur. In the face of Meta's poor privacy track record, it's essential Meta protect users' data from abortion-related law enforcement requests. Doing so would improve user trust, Meta's reputation, and consumer loyalty. To that end, our company should consider additional policies and practices to enhance encryption and protection of users' data. Increased scrutiny of law enforcement information requests is also essential before obliging. We urge you to support Proposal 9 to improve data handling practices so that Meta does not expose users to serious risks stemming from abortion-related criminal prosecutions. Thank you.
Thank you. The board's position can be found on page 84 of the proxy statement. For Proposal 10, Sophia Wilson will be speaking on behalf of As You Sow and the other co-filer. Operator, please play Ms. Wilson's recorded statement.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present item number 10, the shareholder proposal addressing Meta's problematic enforcement of community standards and user content. As You Sow has been engaging Meta for the past few years, asking our company to take responsibility for the material damage to our brand caused by poor content moderation and lenient community standards. We remain concerned about the risk to all stakeholders as a result of Meta continuing to not take seriously its duty to control the dissemination of user content that promotes hate speech, disinformation, and content that incites violence. The shareholder proposal asks for a quantitative and qualitative assessment by external experts analyzing why the company's enforcement of its community standards are ineffective at stemming harmful content. This proposal's requested report is an opportunity to assess our company's enforcement practices and a chance to try to repair our tarnished reputation that is so strongly associated with misinformation. In its statement of opposition, management openly acknowledges that content that violates our standards stays up if, quote, it is newsworthy and in the public interest. With regulators, advertisers, and users watching and judging Meta in a time where misinformation causes legitimate harm, we wonder how far our company will bend its own rules, even at its own expense. The company's recent layoffs of 75% of its fact-checking team indicates a lack of will and now a lack of capacity to enforce its community standards. This will lead to an increase in our platforms being used to inflame fear and organize acts of hate around the world. It's time to take responsibility for the negative impact of the content we allow on our platforms. As we shift to focus on artificial intelligence, shareholders wonder if we can stay competitive given our reputation. When our own version of ChatGPT was released just 2 weeks before ChatGPT, we came under intense fire for our product making up or mischaracterizing certain information, so we pulled it back. Although ChatGPT has similar problems, the company creating it was allowed more leeway as it was wades into a developing field. Because of our reputation, we were not given the same grace. In fact, Jan LeCun, our chief AI scientist, was quoted in the New York Times as effectively saying that our reputation is a liability as we try to evolve, and that other companies are not going to get the same kind of blowback. It is both our responsibility and essential to Meta's business to do everything in our power and take every opportunity to address misinformation and other harmful content. Our platforms are a part of society, our discourse, and our economy. We must do better. This proposal is an important first step in doing so. Thank you for your time today, and we urge shareholders to vote for item number 10.
Thank you. The board's position appears on page 86 of the proxy statement. For Proposal 11, Baroness Beeben Kidron will be speaking on behalf of Proxy Impact and the other co-filers. Operator, please open Baroness Kidron's line.
Good morning. I am Baroness Kidron, Chair of Five Rights Foundation here in the UK, presenting Proposal 11, asking for an annual report including quantitative metrics to assess whether Meta has improved its performance in safety and actual harm reduction to children. This resolution was filed by Proxy Impact, Lisette Cooper, and members of the Interfaith Centre on Corporate Responsibility. Mark and Priscilla Zuckerberg have laudably said that in their lifetime, they will dedicate their riches to a better life, to better the lives of children. But I am here on behalf of those very same children to ask for something now more urgent, because something is deeply wrong. Earlier this year, I sat in a courtroom at the inquest of the death of Molly Russell. The court was shown images of teenagers, mainly girls, with blood pouring from self-inflicted wounds on their arms and legs. People in despair jumping off buildings, beautiful bodies so mangled the courtroom sat in shock, many in tears, most turned away, and a court official had to leave the room. And yet, a lawyer paid for by Meta over 2 days argued that what we were seeing was suitable for children, including Molly, who at 14 years old, unable to survive the deluge of algorithmically targeted material that told her she was worthless, she believed it and took her own life. Mr. Zuckerberg, with your controlling shareholding and your public commitment to young people, members of the board and shareholders that voted against creating public metrics of harm to children, executives who paid for the lawyer to defend the indefensible, who lobby ruthlessly against the small legislative gains we have made in the UK and California that would give children greater transparency, privacy, and safety protection. I believe you can do better. Year after year, resolutions to protect children come to the board that you block. The choice you are making is to put your commercial interest above the needs of children, even when it costs them their lives. I invite the board, starting with Mr. Zuckerberg, to think of their own girls and young boys and imagine them now alone in their bedroom, targeted by strangers, undermined by self-harm, or relentlessly served images and behaviors that their young minds are not ready or able to negotiate. If you do not believe that self-harm, suicide, pornographic, and child sexual abuse material is right for your own girls and boys, do not deliver it to ours. It does not have to be like this. The digital world is 100% engineered. It can be anything you want it to be. Meta shareholders, you have it in your gift to build the digital world that young people like Molly deserve, starting by supporting proposal number 11. Thank you.
Thank you. The board's position appears on page 89 of the proxy statement. Next, for Proposal 12, Sarah Murphy will be speaking on behalf of the shareholder comments. Operator, please open Ms. Murphy's line.
We're asking the board for a report on the feasibility of calibrating pay to externalized costs, and we request that the report identify negative externalities attributable to Meta activities that the rest of the economy absorbs. Meta is the largest social media company in the world. Disinformation promulgation on social media platforms can threaten the environmental and social fabric upon which thriving economies depend by stoking climate change denialism, genocide, vaccine hesitancy, ethnic and religious violence, human trafficking, election disruption, and more. This is a bad deal for diversified shareholders who depend on broad economic health for some 91% of their portfolio return. Press reports of internal company documents demonstrate that Meta prioritizes user traffic and engagement over preventing negative economic impact. While Meta may increase its internal rate of return by externalizing costs, its diversified shareholders will ultimately pay these costs in the rest of their portfolios. Meta's controlling shareholder and other decision makers who are heavily compensated in equity don't share the same broad market risk as Meta's diversified shareholders and won't make the right decision here without significant investor pressure. Meta says its executive compensation program is designed to support company priorities and promote long-term shareholder interests. This is false. While Meta's compensation program certainly supports company priorities, it's not aligned with diversified shareholders' interests. Quite the reverse. Meta's compensation program exacerbates the conflict of interest that already exists between corporate leadership and diversified shareholders. Meta says the report we request is too broad in scope to be feasible or effective and would come at a significant cost to shareholders with no discernible benefit. This is false. The proposal seeks a report on the feasibility of calibrating pay to the external impacts of Meta's decisions. And yet Meta has simply decided without any assessment that such calibration would be infeasible. Meta is thus refusing even to consider how it might better account for diversified shareholders' interests. It's also willfully ignoring ample evidence that portfolio values for its diversified shareholder base depend far more on broad economic health than on returns from any one company, and thus failing to address the clearly discernible benefit the requested report would deliver to shareholders. Would you take a company's word for it if it told you that its balance sheet was healthy without publishing it? That its board nominees were suited to their tasks without providing their names or bios? You should no more accept such empty assurances in this case. Trust us, Meta says. Show us, you should reply. To protect your portfolio value, please vote for item 12. Thank you.
Thank you. The board's position appears on page 92 of the proxy statement. Lastly, for Proposal 13, Randy Weingarten will be speaking on behalf of Harrington Investments and the other co-filers. Operator, please play Ms. Weingarten's recorded statement.
I'm Randy Weingarten, President of the American Federation of Teachers and a member of the AFL's Executive Council. The AFL-CIO, whose 16 member unions represent 12.5 million workers, is a co-filer on this resolution. AFT represents nearly 1.7 million educators, healthcare workers, and public employees, the majority of whom participate in defined benefit plans. Our members' pensions total over $4 trillion in assets and are significant shareholders of Meta platforms. These folks' pensions have been saved through a lifetime of hard work, allowing them to retire with dignity and financial security. And it's because of our concern for these pensions that we have become increasingly alarmed about Meta's business practices, particularly the company's failure to mitigate public safety risks and the subsequent damage to shareholders. In recent years, a steady stream of controversies have raised questions about whether Meta's board of directors, particularly its Audit and Risk Oversight Committee, are living up to their fiduciary obligations. Shareholders are completely in the dark as to how the board evaluates risks relating to Meta's social media platforms. And that risk continues to grow exponentially with each passing week. Controversies that stem from a move fast and break the thing's business model are of particular concern to teachers who often find themselves on the front lines dealing with the harms caused by the company's social media products. In classrooms and communities across the country, AFT members are witnessing firsthand the impact of students suffering from anxiety, bullying, trauma, body dysmorphia, and the eating disorders as a direct result of exposure to images on Instagram, as well as the violence glorified on Meta's platforms. These content moderation challenges, along with a steady decline in users and ad revenue, are negatively impacting the company's reputation and shareholder value. In response to Meta's lack of action, state and federal lawmakers are actively debating regulations, including laws to protect young users from harmful content online. But despite this threat of regulation, Meta remains committed to sinking billions into the metaverse while neglecting other more pressing concerns to the detriment of shareholders. Meta's failures should give investors pause. While Meta's Audit and Risk Oversight Committee is charged with evaluating risks, shareholders have no idea how the committee operates, what information it considers, or whether it just cedes its authority entirely to CEO Mark Zuckerberg. The independent audit of and report on the Audit and Risk Committee's performance proposed by Resolution 13 is long overdue. I urge investors to join us in supporting this resolution and demanding accountability and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. The board's position can be found on page 94 of the proxy statement. The polls will close shortly. If you intend to vote and haven't done so yet, please do so now by casting your vote through the portal. While we wait for any final votes to be submitted, we wanted to take a moment to share a short video about some of the tools and safety features we have rolled out for parents and teens on our platform.
We've developed 30 tools in the last couple of years.
There are a number of things that parents can do once they are supervising their teens. This gives the parent some insight into what types of content the teens are looking into.
Family Center is comprised of settings, tools, and insights to help parents support positive online experiences for teens.
When we think young people have spent some amount of time on the platform, we encourage them to actually take a break from Instagram in itself. We worked with experts to provide messaging as a part of that prompt to help them understand how they could leverage their time off the platform.
We work with experts in mental health, in psychology, online behavior.
Everything we do is informed by data and research. The more we can work in partnership with people who are really expert in this area, the better. We are global platforms. A teenager in Bali is no less valuable than a teenager in Boston.
As a public policy community, we need to figure out ways to ensure that, again, these teens are accessing services that are meant for them.
Social media gives young people an amazing opportunity to find community.
I'm inspired a bit by today's young people's capacity for empathy.
This is a place where young people come to express themselves, and trying to provide a place for them that feels safe and open for them to do that is core to the work.
In my case, I'm a father, and it's imperative to me that I'm also part of that effort to build these safe communities that my children can ultimately also go and engage in.
Now that everyone has had the opportunity to vote, I declare the polls closed on the items presented at the meeting. For the record, I note that it is May 31st, 2023, and the time is now 10:46 a.m. Pacific time. While we wait for the vote to come in, and before I turn it over to Mark, I would like to make a required legal statement. Mark's remarks and the Q&A that follows may contain forward-looking statements regarding future events and the future financial performance of the company. We caution you to consider the important risk factors that could cause actual results to differ materially from those in any forward-looking statements. These risk factors are more fully detailed under the caption Risk Factors in our quarterly report on Form 10-Q filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission on April 27, 2023. In addition, any forward-looking statements that we make today are based on assumptions as of this date. We undertake no obligation to update these statements as a result of new information or future events. I see that the vote is now in, so we can announce the preliminary results. These totals are preliminary because the vote is subject to final audit by the Inspector of Election, but that will not affect the outcome on any matter. For Proposal 1, each nominee for director has received a for vote of at least 87%. The ratification of the independent auditor was approved with over 98% of the vote in favor. For the shareholder proposal on government takedown requests, less than 1% of the vote was in favor and approximately 99% was against. For the shareholder proposal on dual